can you elaborate on that?
I can talk about it.
Sure.
I mean,
how would you not support a bill that would allow trade with Vietnam? Because right now there are currently trade between California and the Communist Vietnam.
That's my position, Fat. And so, your question is how do I think about, approaching legislation? And that's how I think about approaching legislation. I don't think about how I can be supportive to the residents of the 72nd District while also supporting trade endeavors with Vietnam. If this is going to have an incredible negative impact on the state of California, I would be shocked. I don't see how that is going to have, that's going to be the only trade opportunity for the state of California. And, there are obviously clearly various voices within the Vietnamese community about doing business in Vietnam. There are many people in this community that do business and that are profitable from business in Vietnam. My position as an elected member of this legislature is to not seek those opportunities and to evaluate them with a very critical eye as far as state business is concerned. The very reasons that Greg mentioned early on in his comments, that some of the pension systems themselves have policies of not investing in companies that are doing business in Vietnam. And there's many examples of that, and I think that that's the way that we need to look at things. And so I look forward to a day when the government of Vietnam changes. And when that happens, then I will change with it. And I will listen closely to the members of this community to understand whether or not it's appropriate, if things are really changing. And so we need to look at that with a very careful eye.
Okay. Mr. Long?
Yes, and I think I agree with two gentlemen. I would like to add to it that there will be a time when you need to remember that your assembly member is only one of the 8 people in the assembly on the floor. Okay, so if there are the majority on the floor who want to vote yes on the issue, the only choice we have to do, the only choice that we can have, is doing constructive by adding language to the bill that help to protect or to reinforce the position of the community. Because the vote no or simply no doesn't help. We are just going to be a loser. Okay, so there will be time that we need to sit down with people and asking, okay, this is a situation we are losing. We couldn't win them. What do we need to do? And that's the time that we need to work with the community to see where's the compromise.
So let Philip, I know this is regarding the state business, which doesn't have anything to do with issue that at the federal level. But let's take that as an example. When President Obama was president, he is advocating the TPP, Trans-Pacific Partnership. A lot of the U.S. representative asked the Vietnamese community on where is our position. Are we totally opposing, or are we supporting it, or are we having concern with it? One of the things that being discussed is, trade is not it's not black and white where we should have trade or no trade. The U.S. right, trade or no trade with Vietnam. But what's more important is we demand certain improvement in human rights. And that demand have to be measurable. It cannot just say, hey, I promise I will improve human rights. Just like with WTO, when Vietnam wanted to join WTO, World Trade Organization, back then in the early 2000s, they promised a lot. And they released a couple political prisoners. But that's all they do. After they get into WTO, they just go back to oppressing the people. And so this time it's very important to us that if the United States federal government is embarking on TPP, they got to put in there the requirement that especially demand monitorable for human rights, and that they can enforce it, and there is penalty for it. Will you do something similar that if Vietnam delegation come to the state and lobby the state to to open up trade, make it easy for them to import more goods into California?
I would absolutely.
I would look at that with a very wary eye. And as far as the TPP is concerned, actually the President Trump has very recently asked to reopen taking a look at the TPP. First pulled out, now he's interested in going back and opening it back up. And also participated in a major summit, economic summit in Vietnam just recently, as we all know. I would be very wary of those types of conditions for the very reasons that you mentioned, Fat, is that a lot of it can be lip service, and then as soon as the deal is signed and the traffic is flowing, you don't get the results that you've asked for. So I think it's always important to engage in that type of discussion, but you have to know who the other side actually is.
Okay.
And who you're speaking with.
We have a lot of experience dealing with the communists. They say one thing, but they do the opposite.
Right. That's right.
Mr. Long?
Yeah, I agree. We need to use the information from the community when it comes to that, because if you say you want to put in the language to measure whatever the issue is, what is the language that we're going to put in? If you put in some basic language, they say okay, and nothing going to happen. And if we, the community has a lot of experience in the trick that community that the communists is utilizing all the time. If we know that, we need to put that in the language of the bill, whatever bill that we have. So basically, we're going back to the point where what is the measure, what is the language we're going to put in to protect the community. The same thing like you go to court and we are, the assembly member is a lawyer for the community, and the community is a victim of something. Okay, you cannot win. Now we negotiate to see where we want to be.
Well, let me ask you another question. And this is very important to the 72 district, because this district is anti-communist because they are a dictator government. Many cities, including Westminster, Garden Grove, Santa Ana, have resolution that do not welcome communist delegation from Vietnam. We make it extremely difficult for them to come visit Saigon. If the communist delegation come and visit the assembly floor, will you protest and work out?
Yes.
I think so, yes.
Okay, Mr. Long? Yeah. Well, it's good for us to hear that. We know sometimes it's just a symbolic, because it's just one district. But it's very important to us to send a message to the communists that we do not approve of their human rights violations.
It's the most important voice in all of the state legislature on that issue is the voice of the 72nd district. So I think you've heard from all three of us, and then we would all stand up for the same thing on that regard.
Okay.
But I just want to echo what I said earlier. It would be fine. I would have no hesitation to walk out in protest, but I would want people to know why I'm walking out, and that's where the weak link is in this whole chain. I can walk out and everybody say, "Oh, well, there goes Haskin, big deal." Nobody cares. But if they understand why I'm walking out, and they understand the significance of what I'm doing, then we've made a difference. So that's where I think the key part of that whole formula is.
Any other question? Because I've been asking too much.
I have another question, different. Very short question. What do you think, do you support, three of you, do you support the pro-life or pro-choice, and why?
I'm pro-life, and I am pro-life because I believe that we have a responsibility to protect life as human beings. So I'm on board with the pro-life position.
I'm pro-choice.
Pro-choice.
Yes.
And why?
I believe that that a woman should have the right to choose over what's happening with her own body, that is her life. And so I believe that she should be able to make that choice herself.
If I say like this, it may be upset. If your mom, like abort you, I don't think you're here today, right?
That's pretty much the case. I don't think I would be here today.
Okay.
And let me answer your follow-up by saying, I think that we need to provide as much support for young women and young families and counseling and resources to make sure that they're making the right choices, no matter what. The Supreme Court in the United States has determined, in Roe versus Wade, that a woman does have the right to choose. And whether or not we agree or disagree is important for you to understand who we are. But we also need to make sure that since that's the law, that we are having young women and young families make choices that are best going to fit their lives, where they are aware of all of the consequences on either side.
But I think
so that they make the right choices.
Yeah, not the human law doesn't mean the God law. And
absolutely.
And another thing, now when I talk, I forgot another choice. For example, like the animal, like dog or cat or fish or whatever, when they wounded, they take care very well. I feel sometimes they take care of them more than the human being. What do you think about that? Is that fair or unfair?
To me, that sounds very unfair. I think that we should live in a world where we value every life, where we care for every child, that we're concerned for people that aren't necessarily in our own families or our own friends or our own network. Some of the things that I want to work on in the legislature have to do with that. Making sure that we have a middle class that can survive, that has the ability to advance, that we don't have a population that are so impoverished that it drags down on the entire society as a whole and the community as a whole. And we look at things holistically. So I agree with you. I think that's very unfair.
Mr. Pham.
I am a pro-life, and rather than just simply say I am pro-life, and I understand what the gentleman next to me say, that we have a law that protect the abortion. We have Supreme Court that already decide that, and we are living in a law governing country, so we need to follow the law. What the state legislature can do is to, if you don't believe on that, instead of violating a law, you can move a little bit up by, for example, saying that I'm going to limit the use of taxpayer of the tax money on abortion, as an example. If I do believe in my position is pro-life, and I'm living in the society where we need to respect the Supreme Court's decision, okay, the least I can do is to prevent using of taxpayer money on that service.
Thank you.
Andy, anh Long, anh.
Now, could we bring it back to the issue of California? No, I'm sorry, I'll be more practical, man, and I guess we are advocated for human rights and religious freedoms and all that stuff, as well as just like some the gentleman here. But again, our follow also concerning numerous areas that happen in the state of California. First and foremost is called Affordable Care Act in California, called Cover California. President Trump planning to eliminate that program. million, beneficiary, it's about over 2 million in California, under California. That's one issue that concern to us. Number two issue is the rising real estate in California. The affordable housing. Most of our young our children cannot afford to buy their own home in California. And we got crimes is on the rise. How we can able to prevent crime, how we can able to stop crime. The quality of education, how California children could able to compete and able to advance themselves, better for themselves in higher education, benefit with the higher education. Environmental, environment in California is also the issue, and then transportation is also the issue. Traffic jam everywhere, and we don't have, any type of public transportation system like train or rail system to able to reduce, a vehicle on the road and things like that. All those issues that concerning us as California resident. If you're elected, what are you going to do? How can you able to better serve our California resident? And those the issue that we just mentioned.
I think you haven't had the chance to go first.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Well, in terms of education, I think we have to look at the way we educate our children. As a former member of County Board of Education, I learned that in California it's illegal to evaluate the teacher performance based on the student performance. You cannot do that. Okay, so if you cannot evaluate the teacher based on the student performance, what are you going to evaluate? And that's why California right now, quite a few years ago, we used to be on the top. Now we are on the bottom of the country. Okay, we need to reverse that. In order to reverse that, you need to be able to change the law. You need to be able to allow the school district to evaluate the teacher based on student performance. In some special circumstance, you cannot blame the teacher if the student wouldn't learn. Okay, if the parent wouldn't help. I guess we can find out one or two isolated cases, but in general, the teacher performance should be able, the school should be able to evaluate teacher performance based on his or her student performance. That's the least we can do. If you cannot do that, then we have no system to evaluate the teacher, and we have no performance on the school. Okay, that's the education. In terms of, you mentioned about the traffic. You also mentioned about the housing price.
Cost of housing.
Yeah, there's nothing we can do to manipulate the housing price. We live in the free country, so the market will decide that. But what the government can do is to encourage the developer to build some more affordable housing. Okay, we can do that by having influence in the tax and the regulation structure, allow them to do that. And in terms of,
you mean incentive,
tax incentive, and the reason that the housing in California went up so high, because also the regulation. There are too many regulations here in California. When the developer have to pay for, say for example, they have to pay for the land survey when we don't need that. Okay, that's going to add the cost to his home, the home that he's going to build, and he has to raise the price accordingly. We need to make sure that our regulations support that.
Yeah. Can you speed up and go to this the third part of which is crime, rising crime?
The crime, I guess, we have to look into the particular crime. That I couldn't offer any general statement in reducing crime, but we have to look into one particular and work on that.
Mr. Lowenthal.
Yeah, a lot of these things are connected. So, for example, 30% of our high school students in the state of California don't graduate. Now, by any standard, that's a failure, as far as I'm concerned, right? So what happens to those 30%? Are they going into the workforce? Are they disillusioned with school for other reasons? So I think we need to reimagine education and how that can make an impact on other aspects of our society. I think we need to invest in early childhood education. We know empirically from studies that the brain is developing at a young age where in a proper learning environment with proper curriculum that we can really help shape and mold young people, very, very young people at a critical time. That's very, very crucial. And then as they go through the education system and they get to high school, we should have a greater nexus between the private sector, between the job and workforce and individuals. In Germany, in Switzerland today, students in high school, they go to school 2 days a week, maybe 3 days a week, and the rest of the time, they're in an apprenticeship. It doesn't matter if they're a Harvard-bound student or a student who can't hack academia. Everybody does that. And maybe that's with something in the business. Maybe they're learning to be teachers or other things. Maybe they're learning a skilled trade. But all of these things, they're making real life connections, real mentoring, real contacts that they can use the rest of their life. And what's happening in the private sector? The private sector that's on the other side of that is getting incredible labor as a result, and also making those same connections and training for their future workforce and so forth. So right now we have this system that's very boxed with walls around it, with not much connection actually out into the real world. So I think that that can have a very positive impact on a lot of different things, a lot of the problems that we have. Very briefly though, I will address a few of those other questions. As it relates to rising crime, we have a big problem in this state right now with morale as far as police, staffing levels are concerned, training is concerned, and we need to really consider making greater investments in public safety. I know, Fat, that's something that you have to deal with in Garden Grove on a regular basis. So I think that we need to look at what is the cost of not doing that. And this is a broader question that we need to ask ourselves. Nobody likes to pay tax. I certainly don't. But we have a cost whether we do or whether we don't. And that's something that we need to look at. And ultimately, as it relates to housing, very, very important question that you asked. We're building around 100,000 units of new housing per year. Based on the growth that we have going on in this state, we need to be building between 4 and 5 times that amount every year. So we've got to get out and do that. And a lot of that is working with local communities on density initiatives, on planning and zoning initiatives. We're going to have some opportunities in the decades ahead based on changes in transportation, driverless vehicles, no longer the same dedication of parking that we had in the past. And we may have some new land right in front of us for those reasons, and we need to take advantage of that. So I think, you asked many, many questions. Each one of those could be its own 2-hour discussion. But you're right. I think that those 5 things encapsulate the most important pressing issues before the state of California.
So, Greg?
Thank you. In terms of education, I'm a firm believer in accountability. I think that, as Long Pham mentioned earlier, there needs to be more accountability for teachers. There's absolutely a part of the equation where teachers have some students that are just either incapable or unwilling to learn or participate, and they shouldn't be penalized for that kind of a thing, but there should be some accountability. I think that teacher tenure is too generous, comes too quickly, and is too unconditional. There are some terrible things that sometimes happen to teachers that should disqualify them from the classroom, and they're protected from those things anyway. I think that we also need to take a better look at the good things that we have within our education system, because we do have a lot of very dedicated teachers, a lot of very successful schools, and a lot of very high-performing students in our system. We need to understand what drives that, and we need to capitalize on those parts of the education system as well. So what's next? Transportation. I think that the transportation situation can very well be summed up with this thing that we're in the middle of today, This very day, as we're speaking, the gas tax repeal folks are turning in their signatures to try to put it on the ballot for November to repeal that gas tax. The frustrating thing that I think most motorists feel in this state is that that tax will not service their needs. They are paying the tax, but they won't get the benefit from that tax. That tax revenue will likely go to a lot of other things besides fixing the roads or improving the road system. Yes, we could improve on mass transit, we could improve on alternative forms of transportation, but what we know, and this is pretty clear, most people that support public transportation support it only in the hopes that other people will use it, not themselves. We are a society that is unfortunately wedded to our cars at this point. You look at what it would take to put in a subway system here in Orange County, there's no way that you could address all the various community needs. It would the community is too spread out. So what we need to do is get smart about what we're doing to make life easier for our motorists. And for those people who want to take alternative forms of transportation, we should make that as easy as possible as well. But we shouldn't let the dollars that we're getting from, whether it's the gas tax that has been in place for a long time, or now the new gas tax, we shouldn't let those be squandered on things that are unrelated. Yeah. And nobody's talking about the diesel aspect of the tax. But diesel is costing all consumers a lot because every good and service that you buy comes to you via diesel truck. And the costs of transportation are going up considerably, and so those costs are now going to be passed down through the chain. Housing. We keep building housing more and more expensive. We have CEQA, which is not only a bureaucratic nightmare and red tape and everything else, it's also an opportunity for extortion from certain labor organizations, and it drives the cost of housing up enormously. And so the thing that's sort of out of balance here is that the people that most recognize the need for affordable housing are also the people that are most supportive of CEQA being left the way that it is. We're going to have to somehow change the formula that we're using. One of the things that's happening with affordable housing now, and if any of us are elected, we'll be forced to address this in Sacramento, is that Sacramento is now looking at putting more and more conditions on local building requirements, so that local communities would be forced to dedicate a certain percentage of their new construction to low-income housing. And I'm opposed to that. I'm very much for local control. I think that there is going to be a measure on the ballot this fall that will allow the portability of Prop 13, and that should impact somewhat the problem that we have right now, which is supply and demand. There's very little supply on the market and a strong demand. If that changes, the prices change along with it. So that's one of the things that I'm doing there. And
healthcare.
Healthcare. Did you guys talk about healthcare?
No,
I don't think they did.
Yeah.
I don't know if we have time. We have another 5 p.m. meeting at Paracel. Is that right?
Yeah.
So why don't we wrap up? Go ahead.
Okay. You go first.
Yeah. I know we do not have a time.
Sure.
But anyway, I look at the pin on your shirt. That already got my vote. For us,
You got my vote too.
yes, because as a former South Vietnamese armed forces, we came over here because we want to maintain that flag. And with the issue for these two gentlemen, pro-choice or pro-life, a lot of people are concerned with. But to us, to our association, all the country back there, they lie. The U.S. government here deal with them because they cover up a lot of bad stuff. If you be elected, go back there, take a look. You've been in many communist country. I don't know you've been in Vietnam or not.
On the border.
Okay, go inside, look in the countryside. Talk
in
to
the
people.
countryside, not at the
Talk
city.
to us.
Yes.
The big city limelight.
Yes, particularly talk to us. We got all the information. Our community, we protest them not because we heard about it. Actually, we do have witnesses. get in and get out, and brought back the information. Look at that. And with the reality happening in Vietnam right now, I don't think anybody have to deal with them. Then you don't have to deal with them. Because our government should maybe been covered by their, trick or whatever. It's just like back in the Paris peace accord. We say that we will sign, our government at that time said that we will sign the agreement if the North pull back to the North. But our government asked the US government, no soldier from the North in South Vietnam. They blind. That's the problem. Because our president said that, don't listen to them. But look at what they do. But the North force already in the South, fighting with us. And how come US government believe that? They will move back. They didn't move.
What I hear you saying is that you want substance over symbolism. And so often the United States has a habit of making agreements and then never looking back to see if those agreements are being upheld. And I'm the kind of person who wants to see those agreements upheld. I want to see the evidence that, in fact, the promises that were made are promises that are kept. And so I'm with you 100%, and it is absolutely true that we need to shine a spotlight on those problems that exist not only in Vietnam, but in many other places around the world. But I think specifically being a representative of this district, focusing on Vietnam is entirely appropriate, and it's actually something that would give me a lot of energy and a lot of strength to do. So I'd be happy to do that.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Can I want to, because I really want to talk to you. Your father, we've been dealing with him.
Yeah.
Work on a lot of
I need to borrow Greg's pen, though.
That's your father. I got one. I got one just because not long ago, there's another issue I brought up. I tried to bring up because I brought up before the other meeting. The pen I got is from one of the elected officers here, trying to give the honor back to us.
Yeah.
American soldier back here at the time the war, not even over yet. 1972, U.S. Vietnamization. U.S. troops came back, but not been welcomed by people back home. And
sad day.
Sad day. I talked to them the time we met them. How about us? We don't even have a country to go back to. You lost a war, but we lost a country. We lost our families, members. We came here and we not even know that we're able to visit them at the time. So they recognize us. He recognized us, that the staff, everybody give us a pin, at least a gesture. Somehow the elected officer recognized our duty and the value. I'm not even say honor yet, but should be honor. As a soldier, we fight. We fought over there. We came over and we tried to build our life in Europe. You already know that. Our community is strong and healthy, and we want to make a statement here. This is our last land of freedom.
I want to say something very briefly about this. There are limits to what the state of California can do, as Fat was saying earlier, and as your colleagues were saying earlier. So what can we do? What are some of the things that we can do as a state legislature? Number one, we can make sure that in our public education system, that all students understand the real history of not just what happened inside Vietnam, but to the people who were refugees, the boat people, all of the pathway that we don't have in our history books right now. And this should not just be for students actually of Vietnamese descent, but for all Californians. That's something that we can control in the legislature. What else can we do? We can, for example, Steven Spielberg did a thing for Holocaust survivors called the Shoah Foundation, where he was able to get monies, and some public monies, and grant monies, where they did video of each of the survivors and their history and their story and their families. And why is that critical? Because it's important for all of the future generations to understand precisely, what has happened. And these are lessons that we can do. So in the state of California, for example, those are two short, very small examples of how we can honor the sacrifices that you have made, continue to make, and that will haunt you and your people, for the rest of your lives.
We need you to be our champions, be our philanthropists, to promote freedom and democracy for people in Vietnam. Yes, it's not your jurisdiction. It's a state can only deal with state.
Yeah.
But you can be the philanthropist to lobby Congress.
Yes.
U.S. Congress to do that.
And one difference between myself and these two very fine gentlemen sitting next to me is that I'm a Democrat. And the reality is that the state of California has leadership that's in the Democratic Party. And so if you want to have a representative in this community that actually get things done for this community and speak for this community and have influence within that group, then you're looking at him right now. That is my commitment to you. And I think that both Long...
So you think you can lobby the other...
If I could finish. I think that both Long and Greg are very, very capable. I think that if you choose to vote for them, then that is something that I respect tremendously. But both of them can tell you, as much as they wish the legislature and the government had a different character, and how it's important.
Sure. Really quick.